Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about reproducing an image using a grid system. Before I do that and show you a couple little samples, there's a couple little drawing exercises that will really help you get better at this. And there's something as simple as this on a piece of paper. Just at first draw a square and then see if you can stay right on that square. And these are just little exercises that really help you control where your line goes. Then you can take that square, and this is kind of a rectangle, but it doesn't really matter, and chop it in half just very quickly, just by eye. And you can turn it and try to chop it in half the other way as well, so that these four rectangles in that big rectangle are all equal to each other. In my sample, the top ones are slightly smaller than the bottom ones, and that's okay. That happens all the time. Another way to think about all this is to take a curvy organic line and maybe do the same thing. See if you can stay on that, rotate around that, stay on that line, 4 or 5 times as you go around. Again, that's going to help you control where your line goes. Another thing you can do is try to reproduce that right down here below it, or actually on a different piece of paper. I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to try to reproduce that shape, the exact same size and the exact same shape, kind of quickly. It's hardly ever perfect. Very difficult to make it exactly perfect, and you can make little adjustments, but there's no need to erase and fix things as we go. Then you can hold it up to a light and see if they match each other. Can't really do that on camera here, but that's a good way to do one of these drawing exercises. A couple more things along the same lines is you can draw a line, just any little line like that. And again, like this one, try to cut it right in half. And do that fairly quickly. You don't want to think about it too much, and just try it this way. You can cut this line into thirds and see how well those three. You can even take a ruler and measure them if you want to. Or you want to get used to accurately seeing the differences between these. Compare the differences just by eye. It really will help your right brain, help your drawing skills. Then if you want, you can take each one of these sections and cut each one of those in half. And again, see how accurately you can do that in a fairly quick way. You can take a line segment and cut it into quarters. You can take another one. You can draw a line down here in a different direction and see if you can make it the same length just by eye. Just see if that's about the same length, and you can measure that and see if they're the same length. You can take a curved line, and over here on the right next to it, see if you can do the mirror version of that. The mirror version is not easy to do. And you can, let's take something else, add another shape to it, and keep on doing the mirror version of it. These exercises will really help you with your gridding, and if you do that every once in a while, your eye becomes much more keen on seeing slight differences, and you'll be able to reproduce things much easier. Along with the assignment in class, there's going to be a couple different things I'll show you, but then give you some general tips on how to use a grid. In class, you might be using one of these flower photographs with a grid on it, or you might put your own grid on there to help reproduce it and make it larger. You might be doing our Wildcat grid reproduction. Eventually, you're going to have a photo of a portrait, and then put one of these plastic grids on top of it and use that as your way to reproduce it and enlarge it. So you're going to have a photograph and then have to enlarge it using that grid system that's very carefully measured out, and we'll go over that in class. And then make a pre-sketch before you start shading. And here's another one that's kind of a sample of what your pre-sketch might look like. But what I'm going to do so we can see things a little clearer is give you a little sample of what to think about while you're using that grid system. Okay, here we go. The main thing is you're just going to draw one box at a time. So here's box A1 right there. So I'm only going to focus on that, and we're doing an enlargement here. It doesn't really matter if you're enlarging it or not. The same kind of thought process is happening. So the key term is halfway. Okay, if you just think halfway all the time, the drawing will almost do it itself. So if I take this square, and again with those exercises you get good at or better at estimating where halfway is. So anytime you want to make a grid, you cut a grid box in half here, you must do it here too. Your grids need to match each other. They need to have the same halfway marks, the same number of boxes, so you can really keep track of how your drawing is going. Now I can automatically see that this petal is going to happen over in this half of that A1 box. If I want to make a line going across this way, making sure that these four boxes are pretty equal to each other, and I'll do the same thing here, and those four boxes need to be equal to each other. Now I can see that the arc, the far left arc of that petal is just inside this quadrant and just above that horizontal grid line that I made. Okay, now I can come down here and I'm going to take this little segment and just make a little mark at halfway. Make a little mark at halfway. What I'm going to wind up doing is making a couple little landmark lines that I can almost then act like it's a connect the dots kind of a drawing. So now I'm going to I've cut this section in half. Now watch this, I'm going to cut this section in half, and it's practically right where that petal cuts through our original grid. So I cut this one in half and do the same thing. I'm going to cut this one in half, and again I estimated that that's right where that petal cut through. So between here and here I have this little wavy line, and I can see if I extended this halfway mark up a little bit, I can see that's right about where that area of the petal is. So I know as I do this, I'm going to let my line curve and follow that a little bit, and then it's going to come over here and make a curve that connects. And again, that may not be perfect, but that's really close. Something that you wind up doing is doing a little bit of the drawing and then coming back and making a few corrections. But your corrections are pretty minor if you're really thinking of halfway. So up here I'm going to go between here and here, and that matches right here between A and B. That flower petal cuts almost exactly halfway through. So that one is easy to do. And the whole thing stays below. If I were to cut that in half, the whole thing pretty much stays below that. So if I were to just draw a line here, I know that I have to get this little curve and make sure it's below. And remember we talked about negative space. So if there's a line here, I can see I'm shading in that negative space, and that's again just as important to look at when you're doing this kind of a drawing. Look for the negative space. How much space is between the drawing and the grid. And we won't finish this whole drawing in this little demo. Well, I might do it in fast speed, but we'll see how that goes. And now we have an interesting little spot here. See this little triangle, and almost a matching one right under it. Looks like a little hourglass right here. So I'm going to estimate that's halfway. Here's halfway, and I can see that there's a little angle coming down, so I'm just going to put that mark there for now. I might adjust it later. Between here and here, I'm not looking at the drawing right now, I'm looking at the grid. That's right about halfway. There's one half, and then the rest of the space, I cut that in half too. If that's half, here's the rest of the space. I'm going to cut that in half also. And that is right where that cuts through. I'm getting kind of lucky here. And then I can kind of draw that triangle, and then there's that little hourglass shape right there. And that looks like it's pretty close to that one. Then there's a little bump here that's going to blend right into this line that I estimated here, and then that the inside of that petal is nearly parallel, and then it blends right into this line just before it gets to this grid line. So that's the way you think about doing this. I'll put it in hyperspeed for a few seconds, and then we'll wrap it up in a So now that we're finished it, you can see how many times during that sped up film I was checking back and forth, and how many times I made these little marks and really made sure that the drawing really came close to where I was making those marks. If it was at just to the left of that line, I knew it just went to the left, realizing that there's an enlargement, so it has to be in proportion. But you can see how you can get pretty darn accurate, and if you really don't lose the mindset that you're supposed to be using that grid, your drawing will be really accurate. And I didn't worry that it was a flower, this little flower shape. All I worried about was where the shape intersected with the grid lines and the halfway marks that I made. So if you're doing a face or something like this that's more complicated, again, just look at the shapes and where those shapes go through the grid lines, and watch out for, really watch out for negative spaces. That little triangle left behind. If all of those are right, and there's a little triangle right there and a little one right there that you watch out for. Look at this little abstract shape in the negative space right there, and see if that is something that's very similar. Those, if your negative shapes are correct, then your positive shapes will also be correct. So it's just as important to look at those negative shapes when you're doing this. And after you get this pre-sketch done, then we're going to trace it onto our final paper and start doing some shading. When you get to your portrait or your oil pastel flower drawing, it's all going to be a similar use of that grid system, and you'll be able to reproduce something and enlarge something with really a lot of accuracy.